plea for getting it together and dealing with North Korea. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Kelly, we want to bring in Jonathan Wachtel, former communications director at the U.S. mission to the UN, a friend of ours here at Fox News. Hi, Jonathan. Thanks for being with us today.
Hi, Laura. Pleasure being here.
All right, so I just want to get your first initial reaction to when you saw just what we all saw on our phones here on the mainland, you know, that there was a false alarm in Hawaii, and you could imagine right away what people were going through. What were your initial thoughts, Jonathan?
You know, it's sad to say, but it was sort of a thought of it's a matter of time until you would have something like this happen. I mean, obviously, a false alarm like this is completely unacceptable, and we have to get to the bottom of what transpired here and make sure that our systems are tight and capable of pulling off what they're supposed to do for the public. There's obviously a major problem here. But what it is a stark reminder, as the Congresswoman was saying, that we have a couple of crises happening right now that are utterly dangerous. We have a North Korea that is perfecting getting nuclear weapons onto intercontinental ballistic missiles that are capable of causing mass casualties. And Hawaii, just like Japan, and the Japanese, by the way, for months now have been dealing with air raids. They themselves have been dealing with the fear of having a North Korean missile fall out of the sky and hit them, or hit one of their shipping vessels out at sea where some of these missiles have come down. These are real problems that need to be addressed.
Absolutely. And as somebody who, as we all know here at Fox, has been following world affairs for as long as you have and the time you've spent over at the United Nations, you know, what do you foresee happening in the coming weeks, in the coming days, as reaction to this? Because it's obviously, as the Congresswoman said, and you said, that the reality of this threat is real, and she said there is no more time to waste. What could we see happening in these next few days and weeks?
Hopefully this will cause some more stirrings and impetus to get things done more rapidly, to try to move things along, to try to get a negotiated settlement with the North Koreans, if that's at all possible. I mean, obviously Kim Jong-un is not the most easy person to deal with. He is at the center of the current crisis. He's the man who's threatening our citizens at the moment, and why people are living in fear in Hawaii and other parts of the world because of his erratic behavior and his set development of these nuclear weapons to ensure his survival and the survival of his dastardly regime. So we need to move on these things very rapidly. Hopefully we'll get more traction at the United Nations, but ultimately it comes down to us and our policy and how we're going to handle the North Koreans, because it really is a problem between our two nations and trying to resolve this. There are some positive signs that we've seen with the South Koreans and talking about the Olympics, but that's small potatoes compared to what we're dealing here with in terms of a nuclear threat to our citizens.
An incredible day unfolding before us. Jonathan Wachtel, thank you so much for being with us today to discuss these matters. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jonathan.
And as we continue to follow the developments of this breaking story out of Hawaii, and that's the fact that it received an alarm, a false alarm about an attack, a ballistic missile coming in to strike and people to take shelter. We want to hear from resident Alex Michaels right now. Alex, where do you live in Hawaii?
I'm on the west side, so we're over in Martha Kilo, Hawaii.
Tell me what you encountered this morning.
It was probably about 8 o'clock, early morning, and was laying in bed, and my wife frantically comes running into the room, showing me the phone, saying that a ballistic missile was inbound and that this was not a false alarm. Or not a false alarm, but not a drill. And so we kind of just let it sink in for a moment and started texting all of our friends because we're, you know, on an area where I guess a couple months ago when the Hawaii newspaper here had released saying this was a blast zone area, we knew that it'd be safe on the west side. So we just started texting our friends, and it got really, really scary when a particular friend of ours, a few of them who live on base, didn't have any clear-cut notice or understanding of the situation, and when they, you know, didn't really have any answers for us either, other than that they were told to go west as well. We just kind of sat back and waited for direction.
You waited for direction, and so was there a sense of bewilderment, not knowing, do you turn to the left, do you turn to the right, do you seek cover somewhere, and was there any sense at all, and how long did it go on before you found some answers?
It probably, I honestly, no, from the get-go, I think it was just try to stay calm, because obviously something like that, you can't really do anything other than hide and cover. So it was try to get our thoughts gathered in a way that we could go about it. It was probably about an hour until we finally got the okay to say that this is just a drill. And even yet, there's still a little bit of speculation of, well, is it? What's the glitch? What's that? And so it's still just like an uncertainty of, not like, oh, it takes to go out, but it just doesn't really feel very comfortable right now for how beautiful the day is.
Yeah, and even now I sense that you're still a little nervous, and there's some a sense of unease there. But I want to read something to you real quickly, Mike. What is from the governor, who's been meeting with the State Department of Defense as well as the Hawaii Emergency Management Agency to determine what caused this morning's false alarm and to prevent it from happening again. Here's what the governor says. He says, while I am thankful this morning's alert was a false alarm, the public must have confidence in our emergency alert system. I am working to get to the bottom of this so we can prevent an error of this type in the future. If you do this in places like Israel, if there's some false alarm or human error, it can be punishable by law. They take this very seriously because they live in an area where they're constantly under the possibility of war or strikes from missiles. What type of proactivity would you like to see your state government take resulting from today's false alarm?
Well, I think first and foremost, the important thing is to restore that relationship with the public and restore that trust, because, it's the old story of the boy who cried wolf. What's going to happen one day where it does go off and it says this is not a drill, and you got half the population here saying, oh, maybe it is. It was last time, and then, and it's just something that, God forbid, I've never, ever happened. But I think they're going to have to restore the trust in the public, and then implement any type of, they got to crack down on the system, or something's got to go on, because it's not something to be taken lightly, especially just in recent, weeks and months of the tensions that are going on. It's something that we live in. We have that sense, I guess, it's always there with us, living in Hawaii and the closest state technically to all the tension that's going on. It's a lot for us. So when something like this kind of goes on, it's hard. It's a little unsettling, because we live in a constant fear, but we still go on with our lives. And
Alex, I think you've stated it very well. We go on with our lives, and that's what all Americans do. We go on with our lives, whether the threat is real or whether it's false, and we go through the whole complete, furor and pandemonium resulting from false alarm. But what you stated was very clearly, we have to have the public have that restoration of trust in its government. Yeah. All right, thank you, sir. All right.
Okay.
And as we move on, we want to bring you all up to speed. We are continuing to monitor the situation that is happening.
And it's actually good. But two things, Martin, I do want to say. The first is, with all due respect to others who have been on the air, I just want to make it clear, I feel like it's my responsibility. The threat level has not changed. This is nerve-wracking and scary, but we should be careful about merging sort of the bigger issue of North Korea, which is fundamentally a mistake, and then turning to the second thing. This was a mistake. Mistakes happen. But what's not acceptable at this stage, an hour later, is that there's been no person who has come out, explained what happened, and give confidence to people in Hawaii that they can have confidence in the emergency alert system. My bigger fear, we can complain about mistakes all the time. Someone may need to get fired, but what I'm more worried about is confidence in an alert system that deals with more than nuclear war, right? We have other threats in Hawaii, tsunamis and others. You want people to have confidence in that system. So still waiting, Hawaii. It'd be good to see someone come out and explain, so that people can begin to understand what happened without rumors and or politicizing at this stage.
Right, because of course it would be irresponsible if the governor or the government of Hawaii were not taking steps to warn or try to protect its people. Unfortunately, the wrong message got sent today. CNN Global Affairs correspondent Elise Labott is here with us now. And Elise, from your perspective, watching all of this unfold, what are you hearing?
Well, a lot of concern right now in Washington, Marty. The FBI, DHS, FEMA, we're all, following this very closely. As we said, there was a concern that this could have been a hack. Obviously the governor trying to allay those fears and saying it was human error. But if you look at the amount of time that it took for the state of Hawaii to be able to correct this, 37 minutes is a very long time. And that, gives a lot of, to adversaries watching around the world that could be testing the U.S. response to a crisis such as this. That gives them, a window into how the U.S. responds in this kind of thing. So not only were the people of the state of Hawaii, very concerned, and it took them 38 minutes to, be able to stand down. Other nations are watching this, and that's why not only was the actual message that was sent out very concerning, but the fact that Hawaii was not able to be corrected in such a long time. That's also a concern because the state of Hawaii gets their information from U.S. military agencies such as Pacific Command, NORAD, U.S. Strategic Command, who these are the ones, as we've been saying, are the ones that have the detection and the assets to see an incoming missile. You saw Pacific Command come out, within minutes and say there is no ballistic missile threat. You have to wonder why the state of Hawaii was not able to get that information out that quickly.
Right, yeah, that definitely is a concern, the chain of command and chain of communication. I want to go quickly now to CNN White House correspondent Boris Sanchez. He is actually in Florida following the president down there. Boris, what are you hearing from White House officials?
Hey there, Martin. Literally just moments ago, we got a response from the White House to our questions about where the president was precisely, what he was doing when this false alarm alert was sent out. The White House responding to our request for comment, writing, quote, "The president has been briefed on the state of Hawaii's emergency management exercise. This was purely a state exercise." They are not responding to many of our questions here, specifically how the president responded to news that this false alarm was sent out, if he reached out to anyone at the Pentagon or his National Security Council, or if there was any kind of security plan put into place. CNN was able to confirm that at the time the president was at Trump National Golf Course. He has since returned to Mar-a-Lago, but there are no answers yet from the White House as to what the president's initial response was, who he was with at the time at the golf course. We know the president travels typically with a military aide that has security plans in place in case there were some sort of emergency while the president was traveling. Also, the president is never far from a nuclear football and all sorts of again, contingencies to be able to respond to a situation like this. No comment from the White House on that, though we've asked multiple times. They referred our questions to the Department of Defense. We've also reached out to the National Security Council, but they have yet to respond, Martin.
Boris, was there any visual indication of a change of security posture around the president, around the golf course, around the area?
None at all whatsoever, Martin. Our cameras did spot the president earlier today at the golf course, but it was unclear, again, who he was with or if he was actually even golfing at the time. Still not a lot of clarity from the White House here on what exactly the president's response was to this, what he was doing, whether or not any plans were laid out, or if there was any kind of mobilization of security at the time. But we are going to continue pressing to get answers, Martin.
Mm-hmm. And we appreciate that greatly. The statement now coming saying that the president has been briefed on the situation in Hawaii, a false alarm that was triggered out that way. Boris, thank you very much. We'll check back later. Let's go back to see
a pill that would last. So I made my pill.
Jonathan, what do you make of that?
Look, it's too early right now, Kelly, to make judgment.
and that is the concern about North Korea. This alert system is probably, what, more advanced in the state of Hawaii because of the fact that they truly are a potential target as opposed to the rest of the nation that are sort of still wondering if North Korea can reach.
Right, so it would be based both on its threat in the, or its vulnerability in the Pacific, and then also tsunami threats, which for when I was in government were always a concern because of earthquake or seismic activity. In the ocean, I should say, so Hawaii is obviously responsible for Hawaii. There is a FEMA presence in Hawaii, a federal presence, as well as the military presence. And what's important to note is because of the
They're in Hawaii, including the Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard, who is extremely
should have had test in it and draft or whatever else, but it's right to test systems all the time, especially because of the threat that Hawaii feels right now. But that alert that went out was not formally retracted for over 40 minutes. In between, because of that silence, that's when you saw the military, NORAD, others, Pacific Command come in and say, no, it's a mistake, just to make sure no one behaves in any way based on false information. So I'm just going to come back to the same point. It's all about confidence in the systems that alert the public. That's what our security and safety are about. This is why people die in hurricanes, because they don't listen to evacuation orders because the one before was wrong. You have to have people have confidence in the system. And it's inexplicable to me at this stage that we have not seen someone from Hawaii Emergency Management come out and just, even if it's, here's what happened, and here's someone who can take questions from the media. People want to know that they're on it. And
Julie, let me just interrupt and ask you this. We heard the governor tell Sarah Seidner that, wrong button pushed during shift change. Does that make sense to you?
So here's the thing, each system's going to be different. It does not make sense to me, but I'm also on CNN right now, so I don't want to sort of have, I follow Twitter, so I don't want people to have a lot of conspiracy theories coming out. A mistake was clearly made. Normally, you have sort of what the equivalent of dual a dual system, I'm not going to try to pronounce it, in which you would have sort of a redundancy in the system. In other words, you press the button, it says, are you sure you want to send this alert out? And you press it again. Every system of communication in the military and in Homeland Security would have that. Maybe someone wasn't paying attention or not knew. That's the first thing. The second is just even the second they knew it went out, it's got to come back through the same communication channels, because the people who received it are the ones who are going to be following it.
All right, Julie, let me stop you there just for a minute, because I do want to get to Steve Moore. He's a man who knows these systems. Steve, does the explanation the governor gave, wrong button, shift change, make sense?
No, and by the way, Julia knows these systems very well too. I don't mean to take away from that, but Murphy's Law, what can go wrong will go wrong. You cannot allow a system to be set up that will allow this kind of mistake. If a button can be pushed at shift change, I mean, it seems like every shift change a certain button was pushed. If the wrong button could be pushed and send this information out, it's an unacceptable system. And Julie's right, we cannot impact negatively the confidence in the system. When you do these kind of things, you just damage the entire system. So what has to happen now is Hawaii has to come out and explain to the people what happened, then why it won't happen again, so that they can restore the confidence in this. You can't allow Murphy to run your system.
No, 38 minutes though, Juliet. It's a staggering amount of time before someone says, hey, it's not real.
That is, and that's why you saw the military step in, right, just to make sure that no one was acting on wrong information. And normally these systems are also self-corrective, or you can follow up on them really quickly. Those of us who live in areas that get hurricanes or blizzards, you're constantly getting these updates. I don't know if panic ensued in the offices. They realized they made the mistake. They watch CNN and they're waiting. But it's unacceptable at this stage. And so those of us in public safety or policing are somewhat understand mistakes happen during crises or when you're testing systems. That's actually why you test them. But acknowledging the mistake and coming out is just really important at this stage. I think, and I just want to say one last time, this was scary to a lot of people, but let's just be careful about what didn't, or just be clear about what didn't happen. Nothing's changed on the threat, so we just have to be. It's just be clear about that because we just have to have our heads back on and sort of recognize, thankfully, that this was a mistake, but doesn't change any of the geopolitical calculations that people will use in an instance like this.
All right, point well taken. Thank you both very much for joining me. And to reiterate, a false alarm sent to the people of Hawaii of an incoming ballistic missile. 38 minutes went by before the public was officially notified it was not true. Fear did spread on the island. We have not heard of injuries or any other kind of fallout from it, but you can bet that families were terrified for a substantial amount of time. We will still continue to work and find out exactly what went wrong and why.
We sent to residents of Hawaii. The president right now not in Washington, D.C. He is in West Palm Beach at his private club for the long weekend. A statement here just crossing through the White House pool from the deputy press secretary at the White House. That's Lindsay Walters. It's being characterized here as something different. I just want to read from what she had to say. The president, quote, has been briefed on the state of Hawaii's emergency management exercise. This was purely a state exercise. So we'll continue to dig into that further. What we've heard here was this was a mistake from the Department of Emergency Management.
David, if I could jump in.
Jacob, please.
If I could jump in. This was not an exercise. We were there yesterday. They were very clear to us about the exercises and what those exercises look like. If that is the statement coming from the White House, from what I learned on the ground, within the bunker, within the room where that alert would have been sent out from around 8 o'clock this morning, this was a big mistake. This was not an exercise whatsoever. Those people are trained only in that room, only to push that button when they get a call from U.S. Pacific Command. From what I heard from your guest earlier, we did not hear that this was a call from U.S. Pacific Command.
All right, much more to come here as we continue to follow this story. Again, a false push alert sent about 90 minutes ago to folks in Hawaii indicating a ballistic missile was headed to Hawaii. Concluding with the phrase, "This is not a drill." A few minutes later, we found out that, in fact, this was a false alert. We'll have much more to come here from our correspondent on the ground perspective from Washington as well.
Your body was made for...
Put down the pie, pick up the phone, and get with the program.
Think, well, this wall's like 3,000 years old.
Being on a Peril tour on our anniversary was better than anything I could.
In the CNN newsroom, here is what happened. A statewide emergency message went out ordering people in Hawaii to take shelter because a ballistic missile or missiles were headed to Hawaii for nearly 40 minutes. The people of that state who got that message had reason to believe they were under attack. Thankfully, this was just a false alarm, but the panic and fear was very real. And I want to take you to Hawaii right now, where the governor just spoke. Let's listen in.
Early this morning, an error was made and a false alarm was sent to cell phones and to TV and radio. We investigated, and as soon as we became aware that it was an error, we took action to send the notification that it was a false alarm. This should not have happened. We are investigating the sequence of events that occurred. An error was made in emergency management, which allowed this false alarm to be sent.
Can you explain that error in depth as much as you can?
It was a procedure that occurs at the change of shift, where they go through to make sure that the system is working, and an employee pushed the wrong button.
It came down to a person pushing the wrong button. Who is that person?
Well, it's one of our leaders. It's my responsibility, so this would be my fault. The whole purpose of this is that the change of shift briefing is for each shift to understand what is the process. We'll take action to prevent this from ever happening again by having more than one person there to do this, make this decision. We'll work on equipment changes. But again, let me finish the investigation. This is my fault, and we'll work on so that this doesn't ever happen again.
Vern Miyagi, the head of HEMA.
I'm the administrator of Hawaii Emergency Management Agency.
Were you here when it happened?
No. This is designed so that we don't have to be here if this type of event happens. We don't want people calling us to get permission when we have such a short time window. This is regrettable. It won't happen again because the criticality of the time on this type of event and the credibility of this alarm going up is critical for us saving lives. So we'll take action to make sure this doesn't happen again.
You know, and certainly, you know, the whole situation is a balance, right? We do know that under a ballistic missile attack, the time frame allowed for response is very short. And so we have been working at understanding to give the people as much notice as we can. And obviously there was a breakdown in the procedure that allowed the false alarm to occur. It's regrettable, and we will be looking at all of the policies and procedures that occur at the change of shift and other times that may be vulnerable to make sure that this event does not happen again.
You know, we were at the news station when it happened, and a lot of folks did not know what to do. We tried to get in contact to confirm what had happened. And about 30 minutes later, another alarm went off saying, I mean, there was a pretty long lag time to confirm everything.
We need to work on the response time. If anything like this happens, the cancellation got to go right away. So let me work through that and find out what the process was and why it didn't go up quicker.
Can you tell us why not all cell phones received the alert?
I can't tell you about the equipment-wise, but I think it depends on the carrier. You know, what is the carrier or the company that sponsors that? But we'll review that too, because all of them should have had this.
Sir, under the best circumstances, if they realized a mistake had been made right away, could they have written out a correction and pressed the button to send it out within a minute?
Well, there's a cancellation process that should have gone out right away, so let me get into that and why it didn't go out right away.
Can you tell us anything about that right now?
Not right now. I have to go back and check into it.
And the person who pressed the wrong button, they were by themselves in the room, nobody else around?
It was an inadvertent mistake. The change of shift is about 3 people to 3 people, 24/7, 8-hour shifts. That should have been caught as far as the process should have. It should not have happened. So let me get into that and we'll make sure it won't happen again.
Can you explain, is it as simple as pressing a button, or is it going, you know, through something else?
There's a checklist that is in place. So that should have been followed, and I'm going to find out why it wasn't or what happened in this. Again, let me assure you that I'm going to look through this, investigate, and this will not happen again.
Was this a failure to plan in the first place before this program ever went into place, not to have a better safeguard?
No, I think we have the process in place. It's a matter of executing the process. Again, it's human error. And I'd like to just make sure that we understand it's a human error. But the process has to be looked at, the procedures have to be looked at again to make sure that this doesn't happen again.
This change in shift routine happens 3 times a day, 7 days a week, 365 days out of the year. And for the most part, it occurs flawlessly. There was an error today, and we will be investigating and changing procedures so that we can avoid this from ever happening again.
Yeah. Clearly, there was a lot of panic today, and now if there is another actual alert, there will be much doubt. So what is your message to the people out there who just aren't going to believe it next time?
You know, we understand. I was wakened by the alert like everyone else here in the state of Hawaii. It's unfortunate and regrettable. We will be looking at how we can improve the procedure so it doesn't happen again. You know, we are balancing informing the public as soon as possible. We definitely need to improve our procedures to ensure that when we find that it is an error, that we will be able to issue that as quickly as we inform the public.
You know, I think a lot of people, you know, will be relieved that it was a false alarm, but at the same time, it sort of brings us back and says that this actually is a real threat. You know, that this can actually happen. So.
Yes, I can't paint anything good on this. But again, this is what we experienced today. It happened. We can learn from it and get better in the future.
There's a couple things in the procedure that alerts would go out And then the sirens would sound to inform people so that we know that not everyone will get notified via cell phones or TV and radio. And the sirens is a signal to tune in to TV or radio to get more information. So clearly there would be a process that would occur if it was a real attack. We apologize for the false alarm, and certainly we will be looking at all the changes we need to make to ensure that this never happens again.
What did the military, what was the military's role this morning?
They were not in.
No, there's no specific military role.
I was with the Adjutant General at Hickam Air Force Base for a meeting, and as soon as we got the alert, First General Logan contacted US PACOM to verify that was a false alarm. Once we had confirmation, that's when we started working through notifying the public.
Do you guys all, when that alarm went off, you guys have a procedure that you guys contact the civil defense and they give whether or not it was, a false alarm or true or not?
Yes. So we did both, confirming with Hawaii Emergency Management Agency and the United States Pacific Command.
So the military leaders you were with, they got the alert.
Correct.
They must have been.
Yeah, we're in a meeting, and about 10 people all at the same time got the alert, and everyone's looking down, and the first thing we did is start contacting the appropriate personnel.
Yeah.
I wanted to clarify an earlier question. So what should the public do? The bottom line is, if there's an alert like this that occurs again, take the appropriate action. Get inside, and stay tuned. If there's an all clear given, that's how you'll be notified through the media. So we just urge the public to keep with that 3 things.
Thank you. I imagine there will be some follow-ups. Are you guys offering any other media availability today to learn more about it? There's still a lot of unanswered questions.
If anything else happens to me, we'll send out a release or an invite.
Okay.
We'll keep you guys in the loop.
Okay. Thanks so much. Get the word out.
Again, just moments ago, we were hearing there from state officials, including the governor of Hawaii, about exactly what happened to result in a false alarm being sent out that a ballistic missile or missiles were headed to Hawaii. It took 38 minutes before a correction was actually sent out via the same system that sent out the original message. The original message said this was not a drill, which sent people into panic. I want to bring in our global affairs correspondent, Elise Labott, here. So, Elise, a couple of takeaways here. Obviously, a huge sigh of relief that this warning appears to be some kind of a mistake, that somebody pushed the wrong button, is what we've just learned. But the bottom line is it scared the whole state of Hawaii a whole lot. Walk us through what we knew before this press conference, because they kind of picked up with some of the trailing questions that we had, but there's a lot more that was to this story.
Well, Anna, there are a lot of unanswered questions right now, and nerves obviously going to be raw, not just in the United States, but I think, and particularly in Hawaii, but around the world for some time. So around 1:30, those texts started going out, and a lot of concern, you look at the time that it was in North Korea. You look at the fact that, Hawaii local broadcasts were not broadcasting. You wonder, maybe this is a false alarm. Congressman Tulsi Gabbard immediately got on the phone, started calling local officials in Hawaii, calling military, Pacific Command, trying to find out what happened. She really was the first public official to say, this is a false alarm, do not worry, I'm being assured that this is a false alarm. About 20 minutes later, Pacific Command then put out their own notice that said this was a false alarm. We have detected no ballistic missile activity, and you have to note that Pacific Command, Strategic Command, NORAD, all these federal military divisions are the ones that have the assets to detect any incoming ballistic missile activity. That's where the state of Hawaii would be getting their information from. And they saw that the state of Hawaii was not putting anything out. They immediately, Pacific Command on the record, put out a statement. This was a false alarm, there's no activity. Again, we're still waiting for the state of Hawaii to put out their message. CNN had Tulsi Gabbard on the air. She was talking about what she learned. The other senator, State Senator Dan Schatz, also put out something on
Brian
Twitter that this was Brian Schatz, excuse me. I knew I was going to get that wrong, but was human error. And then we started to hear from other officials. 38 minutes it took the state of Hawaii to put out that false alarm. And look, that never, you know, when you talk to people that are in charge of these kind of systems, usually a system goes out that says this is a test. You know, it's kind of like when CNN has a report or a government has a report that's a draft. You do not put out, you don't even have a message like that without any kind of embargo or saying this is a test, because of accidents do happen, and these type of accidents you get concerned. But, you know, look, there were a lot of concerns that perhaps this could have been a hack. Cyber systems, obviously a lot more attention to that by the U.S. military. That doesn't seem to be the case, but a lot of concerns that adversaries around the world could have been watching this, noting the response time that it took. The state of Hawaii, particularly North Korea, could be watching that. So a lot of raw nerves throughout the U.S. government, the FBI, DHS, FEMA, we're all watching this very carefully, and they're going to demand answers as to how this happened.
And the investigation is really just beginning into those questions. Thank you, Elise Labette. I want to bring in Hawaii Senator Brian Schatz joining us on the phone right now. He tweeted this moments ago. Again, false alarm. What happened today is totally inexcusable. The whole state was terrified. There needs to be tough and quick accountability and a fixed process. Senator, thank you for joining us. First, what's going through your mind right now after hearing from state officials now about what happened?
It's just not acceptable. They did have a failure to plan. This is a new process for notifying the public in the case that it's not a false alarm, but they hadn't articulated a process that works, and that's what we just went through. People were terrified. Children were sheltering in place in locker rooms. People were crying. Businesses were shutting down. Everybody didn't know what to do. And the anxiety that we went through was real and terrifying across the state of Hawaii. But more than that, this undermines our ability to reliably notify the state of Hawaii in case there is a real emergency. And the Hawaii Emergency Management Agency has done great work in preparing for and responding to natural disasters like tsunamis and hurricanes, but they blew it here. It's totally unacceptable. I listened in on that press conference, and they don't quite understand how bad this was, to the extent that one person was in a position to make a human error and send more than 1.5 million people into a tailspin, and it took 38 minutes to correct. There's just no excuse for that. I'm a pretty even-keeled guy, but I'm quite angry.
We heard from Vern Miyagi. He is the administrator for the Hawaii Emergency Management Agency as part of that quick little news conference that we were playing at the top of our hour. And he does say, I take responsibility for this. This is on my watch. And here's how they explained what happened. They said that they were going through their normal shift change procedures and somebody simply pushed the wrong button. And when asked why it took so long for them to follow up with another message, he said, we don't know right now. We're investigating into that. And he is taking responsibility. Does he get credit for that at least?
That's fine, but I'll just tell you that, you know, Joe Logan, the Adjutant General, when he got the notification, he immediately called the Pacific Command and confirmed in that moment that it was a false alarm. Once he confirmed that it was a false alarm, in the age of social media, that needed to be tweeted out within 30 seconds. And once we confirmed with PACOM, NORAD, our Missile Defense Agency, that this was not happening, everybody needed to be informed. And the time... The human error at the front end is a process problem, and that needs to be addressed. The personnel accountability also needs to be addressed. But the fact that state government knew it was a false alarm and then took between 30 and 40 minutes to inform the rest of the public is just an abomination.
I want to ask you very quickly about how people didn't know what to do. They didn't know how they were going to protect themselves if this had been real. Did this incident now expose a real vulnerability in terms of what people should do, and knowing that there is actually a procedure in place should this happen for real?
It's a good reminder for everybody that if they don't know what they're supposed to do in the case that this is not a false alarm, that they ought to get their own internal emergency procedures ready. They need to be able to contact friends and family. They need to be able to collect the people who are close to them and shelter in place. That is always the advice in a situation like this. It's very simple. It's about sheltering in place. and getting as quickly indoors as you possibly can. But it's also a good reminder, if people weren't sure what to do, that they need to figure out what to do. But listen, that is the kind of thing that the testing process, the public education process is supposed to accomplish. You're not supposed to accomplish this by this massive screw-up.
No doubt about it. Senator Brian Schatz, thank you very much for your time. We hope you'll keep in touch with us as this investigation is now just getting underway, and much more on our breaking news in just a moment.
In effect, backup warning system from the civil defense authorities, and you wouldn't dismiss it. You wouldn't put that phone back on.